Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Your support is very much appreciated. If you are sort of relatively, or should I say, a relatively new viewer to the show, then a big thank you for subscribing and sort of joining us. And if you've been around for a while, then thanks for hanging around for a while. It's very much appreciated. And obviously, as I said last week, this week's episode of the show is going to be a whiskey tasting. I think I pushed my luck with back-to-back rum episodes of the show. I think it's about time we looked at some whiskey, and I've certainly got some interesting stuff sample-wise knocking around to share with you guys over the next few weeks. Talking of which, obviously, we're fast approaching the festive season. God knows how festive it's actually going to be this year with the current restrictions in place. But as you well know, I end up having to sort of pressures of work, and I don't get the opportunity to do an episode of the show every week, although I'll obviously endeavour to do as many as I possibly can over the course of December. So just obviously bear with me if there's not an episode one particular week. I'm sure you can live without seeing me for a week, I guess. I hope. Anyway, this week's episode of the show. Like I said, we're back to whiskey and we're back to single cask bottlings at cask strength. So I'll keep a lot of you happy. ABV's well above 40% on these guys, and it all came about from an email I received earlier in the month from a chap called Dan Hipson. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, who is the founder of an independent bottling company called the Sipping Shed. Now, I did mean to look up when they were actually founded, and I didn't, so apologies for that, but I'm guessing it's a fairly new, youngish company. I don't know what Dan's background was. Again, didn't ask, so probably should have done, but never mind. Anyway, it's, as we well know, Anyway, so he kindly sort of sent me this email saying, I've watched the show, really like what you're doing, yada yada yada, sort of buttering me up nicely, as they say, and who doesn't like a little bit of flattery, shall we say? But anyway, no, he went on to basically say, look, we're bottling some really interesting stuff. I mean, for example, they've got this Ardmore. Now, when it was 7 years, it was a single American oak cask, Hoggy, I think. I don't know. I'll tell you when I get to it. So basically, so they had this sort of like 7-year-old Ardmore, and then decided that they'd take out 55 litres to put into an Oloroso sherry octave. Left it for 2 years, and then said, right, okay, that's ready for bottling. Bottled it. And then 2 years further down the line, when the Ardmore, or the main American oak cask, hit 11, they thought, no, time to bottle it. Hence I've got the sample here. And in doing so, they then took another 55 litres and put it into a PX octave, and that will be released in due course. Interesting experiment, I mean, it has been done before. Certainly you may well remember I reviewed, I think it was an Aaron, I think, selection that AD Rattray had done. They'd taken, or was it a Boona, I can't remember now, some time ago. I think it was actually close to about this time last year, and it was sort of an interesting look at what octave casks do. So you ended up with, so you had your kind of like your test sample, and then you had sort of like a number of samples that had spent 6 months in the various types of octaves that they were using. So obviously this approach is just a little bit different, and I did say I think you're missing a trick here to Dan. I said I would have bottled it all at the same time, a bit like AD Rattray had done, maybe do half bottles so you could taste across the range. And he said, yeah, interesting, but it just wasn't ready all at the same time. And fair dues, and he seemed to make quite a a play on the fact that you know, they only bottle stuff that they think is really good and is ready for bottling, and I'm thinking, yeah, I kind of heard that one before. Obviously not disparaging anybody, but yes, I've heard numerous independents and distilleries say exactly the same thing. Certainly independents say, well, we reject more casks than we actually purchase, and etc, etc, but and you know, we only bottle what's really, really good. And I'm thinking, okay, yep, right, well, I'll be the final judge of that one, because I'm the one that's actually selling it. Not that I'm saying my palate is necessarily better or worse than whoever decided to bottle it in the first place, but like I said, you know, as you well know, I'm at the sharp end of the stick, and you know, I only can get behind whiskies that I think, you know, fit my criteria, and maybe, you know, my criteria is a little bit sort of harder to crack than some other people's, I don't know. But anyway, so on surface, I like what the Sipping Shed is doing. They're also, or in the process of bottling a Blair Athol, and they're taking a proportion, I think they're leaving a proportion of that in the cask. So again, see how the additional maturation works with regards to that. And also it'll be interesting, because obviously by bottling, assuming they bottle half for argument's sake, then, you know, your wood to surface area is going to increase, pretty much like sticking it into an octave. So, you know, if it's a relatively active American oak cask, then obviously you're going to get sort of, you know, your base here, which you've bottled now, and then maybe in another 6 months, a year's time, you know, you'll have got something that's completely different. But anyway, obviously the problem with that approach is, of course, is that you've got to remember to keep some of the previous whiskey in your bottle until the next one is bottled, and then remember to buy a bottle of that. You know, and this is the thing about sort of what I liked about AD Rackrow's approach was that you've got it right there in front of you. Okay, so some of them may well not have been ready for bottling per se, but it was about the influence of the cask and what it did to the whiskey in a set period of time, which was what was, I suppose, the interesting part about it. But anyway, so that is so yes, it's I like companies that do something a little bit different, try things differently, but again, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the same old saying, and well, you know exactly what that is. You can have all the sort of the fancy packaging and frippery, and you know, it could have been fired into outer space and all that kind of stuff, but if your liquid isn't very, very good, then well, yeah. Anyway, so that basically, I think that's probably about enough waffling. I think it's time to take a look at this week's lineup then. Right, okay, so the first bottling we'll be looking at is a Linkwood. This is an 11-year-old. It was distilled in June of 2007, bottled in December of 2018, so there you go. It tells you how long the company's been around, doesn't it, I suppose. It's a single Bourbon Hoggy, 804-348, bottled at 59%. Now, eagle-eyed viewers may well have noticed the labels on the bottles are all slightly different, and again, something a little bit interesting. Apparently the Linkwood features, what does it feature? The story apparently of the label is that the distillery manager at some period of time, Roderick Mackenzie, is said to have felt that the harmony between whiskey and the environment was so important that even cobwebs could not be dusted from the distillery's rafters. Maybe he was just a lazy bugger, I don't know. But obviously there is, we well know there is an element to that, obviously, you know, microclimates within the still house and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so Dan has decided that to use this slight quirky little tale on the label, and I believe if you sit and look at the label close enough, you'll see a little cobweb and a spider. So, yeah. I said I'd mention it, you know. I mean, you might think it's probably not really sort of particularly interesting, but yeah, I I like a little bit of a quirkiness, you know, but of course. Anyway, so next bottling we'll be looking at is the not yet released Blair Athol. Again, another 11-year-old. This is, I believe, a refill sherry cask. 301012, distilled in February of 2009. Probably bottled, or going to be bottled this month. And being bottled at 59.1%, and apparently what's the waffle about this? Something to do with otters, I believe. Don't know if they've got anything to do with the distillery, but apparently I think Dan likes otters. So I believe there's otters on the label. Okay, cool. I can kind of live with that one. And then on to the Ardmore. So the Ardmore is currently 11 years old. It was distilled in June of 2009, bottled in June of this year. This is obviously batch 2, cask number 1313, bottled at 56%, and apparently this particular bottling, the label features eagles, which the distillery tends to use in its branding, and there's 2 eagles on the label which represent William and Adam Teacher, who used to own the distillery, and also you will notice on there is the date of the construction of the distillery, 1899, and as Dan said, I'm not sure anyone gets the reference, and probably they wouldn't, because I can't remember when every distillery is built. But again, nice little label, but it's, as we keep saying, it's all about the juice. And the last bottling we'll be looking at today is a good old Caol Ila, and you can't go wrong with a 10-year-old Caol Ila, can you? So this was distilled in January of 2008, bottled in December of 2018. It's a single bourbon hoggy, 301643. And bottled at 60.1%, so not a shy and retiring bottling. And apparently the reasoning for the label and for the illustration on the label is the fact that it's not actually a picture of the distillery. It is a picture looking out from the distillery across the Sound of Islay, as Dan said, I thought it was a nice change, and well, yeah, why not? It's a bit different, a bit random, it has to be said. But anyway, like I said, it's. I thought, yeah, I said yes. I'd mentioned them. I thought it was quite an interesting little story for each label, and no doubt each time, you know, they do a new bottling, there'll be an interesting tale behind the label. So. So yeah, there you go. That's this week's lineup. I think it's time to taste some whiskey. Right, okay, so let's kick off with the Linkwood. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? That's a lovely nose, actually. It's slightly oily, it's slightly full, it's got that sort of aromatic, fruity, green apple, citrus, dusty barley. It's got a lovely character. There's a little minerality there. It's a little bit of vanilla oak. It's a touch tight, but it's got that lovely kind of aromatic, minerally, citric, almost kind of austere nose to it. It's not certainly not neat, shall we say, a big fleshy Linkwood. So we're more kind of like more tight, and it's got a lot going on as well. It has a good complexity. I mean, now this would sit on the shelf at a shade under 70 quid, which you might argue is a little bit expensive for an 11-year-old whiskey, but price of whiskey's going up these days, and it's an 11-year-old, it's a single cask bottling, and it's at cask strength. So, you know, I don't think it's a bad price, actually. Anyway, let's see what the palate's like. It's a lot of alcohol there, I can tell you. It's keeping everything in check. There's some lovely rich fruit underneath, malt, barley. The alcohol has obviously just picked up the little bit of wood spice and emphasising the citrus. Again, quite masked, quite austere, green fruit finish, a little bit of gooseberry, green apple, lime, touch of oak, a little bit of hazelnut maybe. Like I said, again, it's all very, very tight. That alcohol is just keeping everything sort of in check, shall we say. So let's put a little drop of water with it and see if that opens things out a bit. That's lovely. That's just done what you would want a little drop of water to do to a young sort of cask strength whisky. It's quite floral now. It's very summery, so probably the wrong time of the year for it, to be honest with you. Lightly honeyed, gristy, a little bit of waxiness, a little bit of oiliness. Not a huge amount of oak, so I'm guessing not a particularly active cask to start off with. So therefore you're getting sort of pretty much unadulterated Linkwood character, and it stands up really well. I think that's a lovely bottling. It's a lovely nose. Just what I want from you know, from my Linkwood. See what the part's like now. Filled out really well now, more typicity, more classic Linkwood, rich, full, juicy apricots, a little Sauvignon like grassiness, touch of herbal notes, a little bit of oak. Not, again, we're not talking a huge amount of oak. Again, the oak is very, very inactive, so you're getting a lot of distillery character. And I'm guessing this is the thing, certainly with, say, Caol Ila, for example, and Linkwood, a lot of it going into the blends. Blenders don't want too much oak, they want the specific distillery character. That's what they're after. So you're getting that lovely sort of richness, but you're also getting that sort of slight minerally citric, you know, almost austere kind of note as well. It's just really well balanced, and you can see why blenders love this kind of stuff, because it's just a lovely whisky. And yeah, more than happy with that. Right, okay, so moving on to the Blair Athol. Again, this is not exactly a shy retiring one. This is 59.1%. Oh, I think I'm going to have to lay down after this episode, I think. Anyway, let's see when those go. Aromatic, fragrant, dried sherried fruit, a little bit of menthol, a little bit of rye-like herbs, spice, a bit of buttery vanilla, a little bit of almost leather, prune possibly. Oak is becoming quite toasty now once it's given a little bit of time sort of to sit in the glass. But you know what, I think that's really nicely balanced. Again, it's, you know, a great combination of oak and distillery character. And you know, that's what you want at the end of the day. I don't want sort of like, you know, a one-dimensional oak monster. To be fair, Blair Athol can sometimes be overly sherried. But like I said, I think this is probably a refill butt. I can't remember how many bottles coming out of this one. No, don't think it says on here. But yeah, let's see what that's like. It's quite a mass finish, really herbal finish as well. So it kicks off with raisinated fruit, herbally rye kind of notes, bit of grippy coffee, toffee, quite a bit of tannin as well, which is being emphasised by the alcohol. Really kind of wonderfully spicy aftertaste now, it has to be said. I mean, yeah, it's a bit short, but that's not a surprise considering, you know, the ABV of this particular bottling. So let's put a little drop of water with it and see what that does to it. Right, I'm getting a bit more sort of spirit character now, getting a bit more barley. The sort of the sherry notes have certainly sort of dropped off a little bit. There's still a little bit of dried fruit. A little bit sweeter. There's possibly a bit more toastiness now. A little bit more minerals as well, and a little bit of a grassiness as well. This is, again, a really complex for an 11-year-old, it has to be said. And although I don't have a cost price for this, I believe it's going to be in and around the same sort of price as the Linkwood. And so, yeah, I've not got a problem with this whatsoever. I think this is absolutely fantastic. Great bottling. Let's see what the pass's like. Softer, longer now, a bit more honey, a bit more barley. Still got plenty of raisinated dried fruit, although it's not quite so intense. It's just really quite mellow. It's quite soft. A little bit of chocolate as well, right on the aftertaste. I mean, again, that is just a lovely bottling. That's how to do sherry, in my opinion. You know, is you know, if you're gonna sort of do a single sherry cask bottling, use a refill. But you know, it's because the balance is just absolutely spot on. Really, really good. You can't ask for more than that, in my opinion. Right, okay, so let's move on to the first of the two peated bottlings. This is the 11-year-old Ardmore. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? That's quite, I mean, it's only, what, 56%, but it's got quite an alcohol prickle. It's quite meaty, quite tarry, quite heavily peated. Probably wouldn't quite go as far as saying it's the heaviest of peated Ardmores I've come across, but it's certainly quite hefty. But again, as in the case of Ardmore, it's not one-dimensional. It's not all about the peat. There is some green citrus beneath, green apple, waxy barley, a bit of apricot, and the peat starts to become a little sootier with time as well. But it's got a lovely savoury character. It's got that smoked meat, that bacon. I mean, that I love. I really do love that. I mean, sometimes Ardmore can be a bit sort of austere, maybe a bit too sort of, you know. But this has actually got some lovely roundness to it, some lovely softness, and although, like I said, that the alcohol seems to be sort of a lot more prickly than what I would expect at 56%. It's detracting from pretty much from the quality of this particular cask. Let's see what the pal's like. Really chewy finish, that's lovely. So it kind of kicks off a little bit more vanilla oak, and I get sort of white fruits and apricot. The sooty peat kind of comes in, maybe not quite so savoury as the nose would suggest, but there is a slight meatiness there. There's some earth, there's some barley, lovely sort of intense finish, sort of like a slightly wood spice, but it's more the alcohol sort of really prickling the tongue, and there's a little bit of green fruit on the aftertaste, a little bit of gooseberry, a little bit of green apple, that is absolutely gorgeous. That is a classic Ardmore in my opinion. Just like Caol Ila, you know, it's got plenty of fruit. It's not one-dimensional, and it's got plenty of peat as well. So it just kind of like wins on all levels. Now this is, I believe, a little more expensive than the other two. This would sit on the shelf at £72.95, which you may well go, ooh, that's a bit expensive. But I can tell you what, the quality of this is. I've tasted a lot worse for a lot more money, I can tell you that for a start. Right, I'm getting more white fruits now with a little drop of water. It's certainly still got a good chunk of peat. It's still quite sort of meaty. It's kind of almost kind of sort of herbally meaty, kind of sort of Cumberland sausage it reminds me of. I mean, I like Cumberland sausages, I can tell you. I like my meat, funnily enough. I'm not a, yeah, anyway, don't want to upset anybody. So yeah, really nice nose, like that. That's really quite impressive. Palate. Softer, more white fruit, mouth filling, a little bit of honey as well coming through. Some white fruit. Again, doesn't quite have the meatiness that the nose seems to sort of imply that the palate should have, but it's still got a nice amount of peat. It's kind of dry, it's dusty, it's earthy peat. There's a little bit of astringent pepper notes on the finish. It's, you know, sort of green peppercorn possibly, you know, and a little bit of black pepper as well. It's just a lovely bottling at the end of the day. I think that's certain. You know, if somebody purchased that for you as a present, I don't think you would be upset about receiving that one for Christmas, I can tell you that. And that's... And finally we're on to the 10-year-old Caol Ila now, and again, like the Ardmore, this is slightly more expensive than the Blair Athol and the Linkwood at £72.95. So let's see what the nose is going to give us. Modern Caol Ila, oily, briny, little bit of strawberry mousse, just kind of hints at sort of immaturity, some pepper. Smoked kippers. Gosh, tell you what, it's been a long time since I've picked up a smoked kipper note in an Isla. I remember I used to sort of get that sort of note pretty much all of the time. Certainly, sort of, you know, Lagavulin, I used to get sort of smoked kippers in and things like that. But it's just an aroma that I've just not thought, you know, just not come across for an eon. And again, like Caol Ila can be, like the Ardmore, it's got some lovely fruit. It's got some white fruit, some barley. Again, not a huge amount of oak, as we well know. Caol Ila doesn't tend to have a great deal of oak, for the same reason that Linkwood doesn't, or can do, shall we say. It's a touch young, I will give it that strawberry mousse note, although it's not sort of OTT, it's just kind of saying, you know, I'm a little on the young side, but you know what, I still love this. I think this is a lovely Caol Ila. Let's see what the pass like. Quite full, fleshy, oily, white fruits. It's a sort of, it's an almost kind of mintiness there. So garden peas. My God, I haven't picked up a garden pea note in Caol Ila since God knows. I mean, I remember sort of some of the earliest Caol Ilas that I tasted. 20 odd years ago, when I think we were sort of, when the bottlings available were pretty much old style Caol Ila, that lot fresher, crisper kind of style. And garden peas was always a note that I used to pick up on in Caol Ila, and it's been a while, it has to be said. It's got plenty of alcohol, but I tell you what, you don't notice that 60 odd % until you get to the finish. I mean, that dries up the mouth a bit, and you're going, ooh, that's got some alcohol. But I can tell you what, when you first taste that, you're going, wow, that's pretty impressive. So yeah, it's got some lovely peatiness. It's got a herbally peat. It's got a touch of salt. A reasonable amount of salt, so I'm guessing this probably hasn't spent far too long on the mainland. It's got a lovely vibrancy, and yeah, it's expensive, I'll give you that, but like I said to you, I've tasted, the other day I was tasting a very expensive single cask bottling, which I was disappointed with, I mean, it was a little imbalanced, a little bit too much oak. I'm not going to tell you whose it actually was. You never know, I might end up on an episode of the show in a couple of weeks' time. But what I'm trying to say is that, yes, all right, there is this weird dichotomy with Caol Ila. Sometimes you pick it up for practically near enough next to nothing at cask strength, and other times it's pretty expensive. So I don't kind of fully understand the secondary market for Caol Ila, it has to be said, because it certainly doesn't seem to be based upon quality or anything like that. I mean, take for example the bottling that we did not so long ago. I was able to sort of retail that at a pretty good price. I mean, yes, all right, I had to sort of tweak my margin to sort of just to get it in at that point, but the point being is that it was sold to me at a relatively, I wouldn't say cheap price, but it was sold to me at a good enough price that I could do that, so I don't know, maybe it's certain brokers, who knows, but anyway, coming back to the juice in the bottle, the juice in the bottle is bloody good, and yeah, I think that was another outstanding bottling. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Well, a big thank you to Dan at the Sipping Shed for the samples for today's episode of the show, and I hate to say it, well, I don't hate to say it, I'm quite happy to say it, that I think he was indeed absolutely spot on right. They are bottling some bloody good juice, and long may it continue. Now, the caveat, of course, is now that can they keep it up? And I've seen with a number of independent bottling, certainly young independent bottling companies, their first releases are really good because they've done the due diligence. They've sort of said, yeah, I don't really want to bottle anything crap, I'm prepared to wait until we get the right casks, etc. And then once they've got a product out to market, the money's starting to roll in, and then the pressure starts to build to sort of buy more casks, get more product out to market, and then I won't say that standards slip, but I think that in some cases certain rigorous criteria are not probably met, shall we say. Sometimes I think that certain bottlings come out because of a financial reasoning rather than a quality reasoning. But anyway, coming back to these particular bottlings, absolutely all bloody good, and I'm more than happy to put these on the shelves. The Linkwood, yep, I mean, that was a lovely bottling, just plenty of distillery character, not a great deal of oak, so you've got all that lovely Linkwood character, worked neat, probably a little drop of water sort of opened it up and made it a little bit better. And the Blair Athol, classic example of how to use sherry, in my personal opinion. Yes, I know it's a single sherry cask, and but it wasn't a first fill sherry monster. It was balanced, it had a little bit of dried fruit, and just worked really very nicely. The Ardmore, yep, quite a nice meaty Ardmore. Yep, certainly not got any problems with that whatsoever. Really very enjoyable. And again, works quite well with or without water. And pretty much the same can be said for the Caol Ila, which is pretty damn dangerous considering it's just over 60%, and you just got to go, oh, I'll have one of them, and then you probably try and stand up and realise that, yeah, your legs don't work anymore. But anyway, the taste in your mouth will be good as you fall over, that's all I can say. Anyway, so that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I have indeed ordered some of these bottlings from Dan, which will probably be turning up in the next week or so. So they're not actually up on the website as yet, but they obviously will be in due course. So if any of them sound like something that you would like to purchase, either for yourself or for a very loved one over Christmas, then just drop me a line, you know where I am. And yeah, so that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I've not done these whiskies a disservice, because they are very, very good. So until next week, or until the next episode I should say, which may or may not be next week, I don't honestly know. Good afternoon and good ramming.